Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Susan Edwards. Healthcare construction and renovation projects are among the most complex, high-stakes undertaking that providers can face. And with mounting financial pressures and tighter timelines, the risks are only increasing. Today, I'm joined by Patrick Melone, Associate Principal with Vizient's Capital Equipment Solutions team. Patrick helps health systems across the country strategically plan, procure, and implement medical equipment, keeping projects on time, on budget, and aligned with clinical needs. We're going to explore the hidden traps that can derail timelines and how small missteps can lead to major cost overruns. We're also going to be looking at the strategic advantage of connecting equipment planning with Vizient's GPO. So hello, Patrick. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today.
So medical equipment planning has been a critical component of Capital Equipment Solutions team. And I know that you and your crew have a very significant role for our clients as they are looking at construction and renovations and trying to manage that overall big picture. Patrick, let's start with the big picture. And in your view, what makes medical equipment planning so important to that overall success in healthcare construction, renovation, and expansion projects for our clients?
Oftentimes, medical equipment planning is an afterthought. It's very natural for these health systems to come in and we're going to do a project. Someone's told them, okay, the first thing you've got to do is you got to get an architect and engineer on board. We've got to determine what the space is going to look like and how big of a building we have to build. They get way too far down the pipeline and then they realize that they don't have an equipment expert online. At this point, sometimes they think they can go it alone. They've got department heads that can do some of these resources for identifying equipment needs. Going past that, you get to a point where the architects start saying, I need more data. I don't need someone to just tell me I need a Stryker OR table or a Steris light. So one of the key things that we look at is trying to be their partner from early design through construction, through delivery of equipment, helping them with procurement and logistics to ensure a successful project.
It sounds like some of the things you just described get underestimated in their importance. It sounds like you guys really pull those big pieces together to make sure that that pays off in the end. But I'm certain that underneath all of that, when you're talking about architects and medical equipment planning teams and all of the clinical teams, that as you're adding people to the decisions going in there, I imagine that it is really easy for some of those hidden pitfalls to show up. So let's take just a minute and kind of talk about what those might be and how they derail projects sometimes.
So the biggest challenge is getting the right people at the table. We pride ourselves on working with their clinical users to make sure that we capture their clinical needs. We have to loop in supply chain, biomed, IT to make sure that all the people that have a hand in ensuring that equipment can be successfully integrated into the building from a network standpoint. So much of our equipment now is connected to the infrastructure, the network of the building. So you've got to have IT there, not just for the connection, but also cybersecurity is a huge risk now.
You hit some very interesting points I'd like to peel back just a little bit. Talk about that clinical expertise and that clinical integration and what those conversations sound like with equipment planning.
When we sit down with a health system and their clinical departments, we're coming in typically not with a blank sheet of paper. They've engaged us as a consultant. So we're coming in with a list of equipment that we think is what they need based on possibly some historical data that we've gained from them from equipment standards and selected vendors. We review that equipment with them. If there's questions, new technology, new developments within a specific category, perfect example is maybe there's some new technology coming out or this health system hasn't bought a new CT in the last 5 years. Now, part of Capital Equipment Solutions has the ability to pull in our capital subject matter experts that are focused solely on that fixed imaging equipment. They're meeting with those suppliers daily, understanding what's going on in the market, what's new technology, what is discontinued products coming up, so that we can help assist our members and our clients make informed decisions, not just based on their past historical use, but actually leveraging that category subject matter expert that Vizient has to help educate them just beyond equipment selection.
I think that's probably such a huge hidden piece that you typically wouldn't think would be in the hands of an equipment planning team when you're thinking about the clinical quality and patient care and patient outcomes. It's a very interesting connection and dynamic in this process. What I think is also interesting was just that IT component that you mentioned and the cybersecurity. I think that is something that we are hearing a little bit more and more every time we peek around the corner. So can we take just a minute and talk about how that piece plays into the planning component?
There's so much connected equipment in the facilities today. Everything from IV pumps, the patient monitoring systems, OR integration systems. So in the surgical suite where they're capturing images, capturing voice notes, dictation, bringing in images from PACS systems, all that has to be run through the IT system. And you've got a supplier of medical equipment that does the infrastructure needs for the OR integration. Those pieces then integrate with other supplier equipment items like C-arms and cath lab systems, even patient monitoring that comes through the anesthesia monitor in the OR integrates through that and all goes into their EMR system and their data management. Being able to capture those images that come from the digital images that they do during surgery, either internal from minimally invasive surgeries or even room status cameras to see what's going on in the room and how they're looking at room turnover. It's a lot of data inputs to manage and how they're going to manage that across their network traffic. It's
so much more complex than you would think of it on the surface.
One thing I want to mention as well in these hidden pitfalls that can cause issues within the plan and within the schedule, failure to plan for future areas. Sometimes people may not be ready to equip an area today, so they think that they just bypass that and come back and build it later. That's really what they call a cold shell, where they just leave space completely empty. There's very little finish whatsoever in that, maybe on a whole floor.
I've seen that
or maybe
happen.
in an area. But what you can do is you can actually plan future spaces and go ahead and have infrastructure items, whether it be electrical or plumbing, HVAC systems sized appropriately to handle that for future, but then not buy the equipment day one. What that enables is so that when they do get ready and they've got the patient volumes or the new surgeons to come in to support that surgery or that specialty, they can add that equipment at a later date.
That's what they call smart planning. That's looking ahead and why that pays off. So thanks for pulling all of that back together and making that all make sense. There's lots of moving parts in here. If we are unpacking some of the hidden pitfalls, there has to be places where the costs start adding up in that. Can you talk to us about where those dollars tend to hide?
We've had a project not too long ago where they were really struggling with their budget. And we sat down with them and we went through and we said, we noticed that when we were doing our equipment planning, you had someone at the table that was saying we needed equipment for urology, but you didn't yet have a urologist on the docket to hire. So at this point, we're really questioning, why are you buying this equipment if you don't have a provider?
How does that really impact the construction and the equipment planning?
The architectural and design aspect is huge. If you don't plan initially the accurate information that they need to build the building, design the building to accept the equipment, things get cast in concrete, they get built in walls. And anything that changes from that after you hit construction documents, imagine construction documents if you've ever built a home, you sign off on the plan that you're going to buy from the contractor. Any change you make after that date, you're going to pay 5 or 10x the cost that you would have paid before you signed that contract, because now it's what they call a change order, and that's where contractors typically make most of their profit. So you really want to make sure that you're identifying accurate equipment specifications day one. Also, how it's going to potentially delay the project because the contractor's possibly going to have to go back in and do rework that's going to take longer time, could delay your opening, which affects your ability to bring in additional revenue day one.
Which is usually at the strategic level why this construction, renovation, expansion is happening in the first place. Yeah.
Bring the revenue in and also serve their communities.
Right, absolutely. So in that whole piece, in the pitfalls of those hidden things that aren't really considered upfront, I'd like to touch on that equipment life cycle component. And we talked about the capital equipment solutions, strategic sourcing, and other colleagues that you can pull in as needed. How often often are the clients looking at that total cost of ownership when they are looking to stock the room and get the equipment put in?
Historically, his acquisition cost has always been one of the most key things people really focused in on. But really, over the last 5 years, we've seen a real shift in people being focused or putting priority on total cost of ownership. One area that we focus on working with our clients on is understanding that the biggest opportunity you have to help with things like service contracts and extended warranties is to negotiate those items early on while you're actually buying the capital equipment. That's where you have the most leverage. You'll have some people say that, no, it really doesn't matter. You don't need that service agreement or that extended warranty until the original warranty runs out. But at that point now, the manufacturer's already sold you the equipment. So what leverage do you have? You're going to have to buy a service agreement from someone, either them or from a third party. At the time that you're issuing that order for the capital equipment purchase, you might as well go ahead and negotiate that service agreement, get that locked in, and ensure that you're getting that maximum value.
It sounds like that GPO component is certainly a very critical piece because it sounds like the terms and conditions that go along with the sourcing can also add to significant costs. Is that true?
It is. And along with the cost of the equipment, the service, it's also identifying and helping the owner understand what are the unique pieces about this manufacturer's piece of equipment on manufacturer A versus manufacturer B. When you look at that total cost of ownership, sometimes it could be utility costs. Product A uses less water than product B. It's all factoring into that cost of ownership because, again, that's a cost that never goes away. You're going to continue, as long as you run that equipment, you're going to pay for the utility cost that supports it.
How much is the sustainability word used during your conversations with new construction and expansion and medical equipment planning? Are clients looking for more eco-friendly, more environmentally sustainable type equipment to put in?
I think yes, on many levels. One of the areas we see is gaining a lot of traction is suppliers that can provide a base unit that is upgradable over time versus in the past, you may have bought a CT unit 7 years ago. And when it's time to replace that CT unit, I now have to replace the whole system versus the shell and the box and the core components are still functional. I can do some upgrades. I can add some additional software and add life to that unit without trashing the whole major system, also without doing as much major construction.
Interesting.
All plays into the sustainability piece.
I've heard you talk about being on time and on budget is expected. And part of why being a part of the GPO for Vizient's medical equipment planning team is so important. Can you talk about that differentiator and why that sets us apart?
You're exactly right. Every medical equipment planner's main goal in the past has always been on time and under budget. That's really what most equipment planners have been driven off of. It's meeting the needs and specifications, meeting the price, and then getting it to the right place on the right time. I mentioned earlier, there's times when you get into a position during procurement, you may be told that there's been an extended lead time or there's so many orders within the system right now, your expected delivery is out 8 weeks, and that really doesn't work with your schedule. Using the power and the leverage that we have within Vizient, sometimes that gives us the ability to get moved up in a production schedule for a customer, help them evaluate the value that Vizient brings and our Vizient clients bring to that supplier to get us that preferential treatment to help keep that project on track. I also think that one of the big things that we've noticed in the past is what we see in the market with other third-party planners. When they're told that they have a customer, a client that is a Vizient GPO member, they check that box and they say, oh, I got it. When they go out to get quotes from the suppliers, they tell the suppliers, hey, this is a Vizient GPO member. We need you to quote the GPO price and the terms. And when they get that quote back, if they see Vizient on the quote, they check the box and said, we're done. And they kick it over to supply chain to order. The other piece with that is we realize a lot of times our GPO contracts are negotiated more for replacement capital than it is for a whole project. So if I'm buying one stretcher, that may be a great price. But if I'm buying stretchers for a whole acute care tower, not a good price. We should be able to get a much deeper discount, be able to get additional value to the customer, either in pricing, terms, or conditions.
These are clearly things that separate medical equipment planning at Vizient from all of the competitors because these are the things that save money. These are the things that provide additional insights to our clients. And I think at the end of the day, the value that they get is significantly more than what they would get from a different team not aligned with the GPO. Let's talk about some of the details around getting projects to the finish line. There's a lot of different parts and pieces and people involved sitting at the table. So it would be great to hear from your perspective and your experience for any client system that is looking for new expansions, new towers, renovations, constructions. Give us some of the symptoms, things that they should be looking for if they are even remotely considering taking one of those directions. What do they do?
When we started off our discussion today, I talked about engaging someone early during design. That's really where any equipment planner is going to add the most value, right? Is getting on early and not trying to come in midstream, late into design development. You want to be coordinating this equipment from day one. What happens a lot of times is we see people engaging equipment planners for planning to get the construction document package issued so that they can start building the building. And then they think that their own internal team can take over the sourcing and get the quotes pulled in and get orders issued. If they can do that on top of their day job, trying to keep their existing hospital operational, what they're not doing is probably being as strategic as they need to be to drive the additional value. They're just pushing stuff over the line to get it done. But then even after orders are issued, you've still got the post-order order acknowledgments expediting to ensure that that equipment delivers on time. Managing the suppliers that have to come on site to do site inspections after orders are issued prior to delivery to ensure that everything's in place to support a successful installation. Managing all the movable equipment that gets received and deployed after certificate of occupancy to ensure that they get the equipment deployed and ready for first patient use. What I would say is you need to pick a partner that can start with you early, help you through the planning, the procurement, the logistics, and close out of your project and stay with that same partner throughout the engagement.
So engage early, define the scope clearly, and call Patrick.
Call Patrick. That's
Perfect.
Awesome.
Budgets are always top concern for any healthcare system or hospital. So let's talk a little bit about how your team manages the budget once that procurement process has started. Give us an idea of what you guys do to manage and stay on course.
Once we get an approved budget, we work with the client from day one to start formulating that budget by creating an equipment list, reviewing it with their users and the leadership. But once we get to that approved budget and we move into procurement, every quote that we get, every purchase requisition that we submit to them for approval has been measured against that budget. If need be, we see that it's not within the budget, we do everything we can to go back and work with those suppliers to ensure that they're giving the best deal that they can. Is there any way to get that price down so that we come in under that budget mark? But as we go through that procurement process, we're making them aware on every purchase requisition, how that purchase requisition aligns with the budget.
So you're keeping the surprises to a minimum.
We're keeping the surprises to a minimum, making sure they're making informed decisions as they go versus waiting for 30 or 60 or 90 days for the next quarterly business review for someone to report out and said, I know that we were under budget 90 days ago, but today we're $100,000 over budget. We're keeping them informed as they go so that as they make those decisions, they've got this full picture.
That is so important because every dollar counts when you're talking about all of this. The margins are so small, being able to stay on top without having those surprises. Our clients probably truly appreciate that component of your service. One of the other things I wanted to ask about is give us an idea of what the role of the medical equipment planning team is once you actually start the construction.
We call that construction administration. You move out of construction documents and you're now building the building. You're not building the building, the contractor is. That's where we really start our procurement effort. So we've got our procurement team working on sourcing activities, going out and soliciting quotes, negotiating those quotes. But we're also, as quotes are issued into purchase orders and issued to the suppliers, we're then working with those architecturally significant suppliers like fixed imaging equipment, lights and booms, SPD, to schedule site inspections during construction to make sure the contractor is providing all the correct rough ends, that the rough ends are in the right spot for electrical and plumbing, that the equipment is positioned in the right spot in the floor plan.
So how much of the hidden cost, the hidden risk, lie in that logistical component?
It can be significant. Small misses can relate to large costs, either from a construction side or even a vendor side to come back in and make a change. Another piece that we do there is we participate in what's called an OAC meeting, an owner, architect, and contractor meeting. During construction, these meetings occur on a weekly basis, depending on the size of the project. Sometimes it may be biweekly. We participate in that as the owner's representative for all things medical equipment. Anything that comes up, they're not pointing the finger at the owner saying, hey, what are we going to do about the sterilizer, or what are we going to do about the surgical light? They look to Vizient to help be that resource to field that question and get that information back to the design and construction team to keep things on track.
You really are the strategic partner start to finish.
Yes, definitely.
Fantastic. Patrick, help us close out the conversation. We've talked a lot about the different pieces and parts that your team plays, some of the hidden pitfalls, and where our clients can have some extra consideration if they are thinking about a renovation or expansion or construction project. What do you think some of the key takeaways to share if you were going to give a client that top 3 list of things to think about as they are preparing for a new strategic alignment or project? What would they want to consider before they got started?
I would say hire an equipment planner early. That equipment planner should be someone that's aligned to your GPO, understands how to use that and get you the best value on that. Someone that can stay with you through the entire project. Someone that is not going to just provide a portion of the service, but deliver a full, disciplined approach service line for medical equipment, whether that's planning, procurement, logistics as a full package. I think that in itself is probably the most important piece, expecting more from your equipment planner than on time under budget. One of the other areas that I think being part of our capital equipment solutions team here at Vizient, we're able to take our blinders off. Most equipment planners are focused solely on that one construction project, and these healthcare systems have a lot of projects going on.
It sounds like an incredible feat, but it sounds like everything that you're doing is unlocking value every step of the way for our clients to have the end product that they are looking for. Thank you for sharing so many details about medical equipment planning and bringing these important details to our attention. We look forward to continuing our conversation and hearing more about the recovery program. So we look forward to having you back sometime soon, Patrick. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
That wraps up today's conversation with Patrick Melone from Vizient. We hope this episode gave you some new insights on how to approach capital projects with clarity and control. If you are planning for a renovation, expansion, or new facility build, consider bringing in Vizient's Capital Equipment Solutions team early. You can learn more about us at VizientInc.com or contact us directly at capitalequipment@VizientInc.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.